I were to ask you, where can you go to find the kindest, most compassionate people on this planet, how would you respond to me? I don't know about you all, but I can give my answer from my own personal experience without any hesitation whatsoever, without even having to think about it. Where can you go to find the kindest, most compassionate people on the planet? For me, the answer is simple: the mountains. Specifically, the backcountry trails of any mountain range. And I have found this to be equally true during my time in the Smokies or in the Rockies or the High Sierras, during all of my hiking excursions that I've taken throughout the course of my life. People who like to climb up mountains, they are simply, in my opinion, the best people. And you thought that I, as a priest, was going to say that the kindest, most compassionate people on the planet can be found in church, didn't you? Yeah, no. No. I have been a church-going person for something like 20 years now, and I have been an ordained-ish person for something like 9 of those years. And while I can confidently say that the best people that I have ever met have been church people, I can also confidently say that the very worst people, the most evil people that I have ever met in my entire life have also been church people. We Christians, we are a mixed bag, that is for sure. The best of the best and the worst of the worst. But mountain hikers, when they are in their element, whenever they are out on the trail, regardless of where they are from, regardless of their age or gender or race or political persuasion or religiosity, regardless of how smelly or dirty or fatigued or sore or blistered they are, I always find them to be incredibly pleasant people and so full of joy. Like little children at Disney World, like a kid in a candy store, like a redneck at a Lynyrd Skynyrd concert, like a bro-y dude driving through town in a BMW who's so full of joy. I mean, these hikers, they happily and kindly share the trail with their fellow travelers and compassionately welcome their fellow hikers to the mountain. And they always seem to say thank you whenever you let them pass as you're going too slow up the mountain. And they offer food and drink to you if you look like you're about to keel over from altitude sickness. And they can even discern the look on your face whenever you start to second guess your decision that climbing a mountain that day was a good idea. Whenever you start to realize that you would have been way more comfortable back in the hotel room or back in the tent, eating Cheetos, lounging around, and taking a nap, right? And as your legs start to ache and your lungs start to burn, and as the difficulty of the climb hits you like a rock, these fellow mountain travelers remind you that it is all worth it, that the view from the summit is breathtaking, and that the journey itself is one that you will never forget. And as you make it nearer to the peak, they cheer you on because they know from firsthand experience just how much suffering is involved in simply getting yourself up there. Many of these folks are like spiritual pilgrims, and the mountain is their pilgrimage. And the words of that famous author and activist and adventurer, John Muir, they seem to resonate deeply with these people whenever he said that the mountains are calling, and I must go. For them, the hike is something they feel joyfully, gleefully called to. And I know all of this because I am also one such pilgrim. I am also one such glutton for high-altitude punishment. While my family and I were on vacation last week, I decided that it would be a good idea to hike up to the top of Mount LeConte in the Smoky Mountains. It's the 3rd highest peak in the Smokies. Y'all, it was a brutal 5-mile hike, pretty much straight up, which also meant that it was a torturous 5-mile hike, pretty much straight back down. And for those of you who have hiked through the mountains, you know that sometimes the journey down the mountain can be way more painful than the journey up. But somewhere around my 3rd mile in, as muscles that I didn't even know that I had began to ache and scream at me, I began to second guess my ability to make wise decisions in life. And I thought about turning around. But thankfully, around that time, I had also reached a clearing in the tree line. And I looked up. And up there was another peak, towering over me, staring back at me. And even though the moon still lingered in the morning skies, the reddish-orange glow of the sunrise had painted the mountain with this just brilliant, serene light. It was exquisite. And even the clouds had descended, and they were dancing across the top of this mountain peak that was staring back at me. It was spectacular. Words fail trying to even describe it. And I found a rock, and I sat down, and I just let myself stare. I can't tell you how long I sat there, just me and the mountain and the clouds and the sunrise, because I was totally awestruck. Time had no more meaning for me in that moment. It was such a sacred moment for me. And afterwards, I understood why so many people on these trails are so kind and compassionate. It's because the mountains have a way of overwhelming you with joyous, childlike wonder, even though the climb can be quite difficult. I don't know about you all, but it's moments like these, moments where Mother Earth renders me utterly speechless. These are the moments where I feel the most alive, the most religious, the most spiritual, the most human, the most divine, the most connected, the most centered, the most joyful. I sat there that morning, and I let the beauty of the mountain heal my soul. I let the mountain remind me of just how amazing it is to be alive, to be a human being on this majestic planet, floating and spinning through space. As Thomas Aquinas once said, God created the entire universe to get us drunk off of its beauty. And I was certainly drunk in that moment, that morning. My friends, as we focus on climate care during this upcoming month and how we Christians are called to love our planet and all of the life therein, the inner activist in most of us is going to want to come out quite forcefully, and rightfully so, because we hear about the horrible wildfire in Lake Tahoe, a fire that has now devastated one of the most beautiful trails and camping areas I have ever been to. And as we read about Hurricane Ida, and as we hear about record-breaking summer temperatures in places, and as we learn more about how ancient glaciers are melting away at a rapid pace, all of this due to the effects of global warming. And as we hear about how air quality in cities across the globe, it's getting worse, and as we learn more and more about the garbage patch floating around in the Pacific Ocean, we naturally want to do something about it for our kids and our grandkids, for all future generations, for all life on this planet. But before you decide to get out there and make a difference, I want to urge you to push pause, to take a moment, to reflect. Because it's important that our actions find their basis in the right motivation. It's important that we find our own healing before we seek to bring healing to anybody or anything else. To not do so would be like the demon-possessed girl in our gospel reading this morning, trying to exorcise another demon-possessed person before she has found her own healing. Or it'd be like the deaf and mute guy trying to heal the deaf and mute while still being deaf and mute. So first, it is crucial that you go and find your mountain. Find your mountain. Let it wow you. Let it change you. Let it fill you with joy, kindness, and compassion. Let it heal you. Go and meditate on the beauty of something that God has created. Let it call you to itself and transform you through and through. Go and find your mountain. It could be a river, a lake, a tree. Many of the greatest saints throughout the course of history have discovered enlightenment or their awakening underneath trees. Even modern figures like Father Bede Griffiths or Father Thomas Keating, or ancient figures like the Buddha, right? Your mountain, it can be a whole forest. It could be a blade of grass or an entire field. It could be a flower or an entire garden. It could be an insect or an animal. It could be the sun's warmth on your skin or the cool morning breeze dancing across the back of your neck. It could be the rain, the snow, the blue sky, the stars in the night sky. Or it could be the image of God in another human being. Go and find your mountain and let yourself feel the sacredness of our planet through it, the sacredness of your own body through it, the sacredness of all existence through it. It is crucial that you go and find your mountain, that you do as St. Thomas Aquinas urges all of us to do. Get out from behind all of your screens. Get in the habit of turning off the TV and the computer. Turn me off and get outside. Put the cell phone down and get outside. Carve out time in your life where you do nothing else but let yourself get drunk off of the beauty of this universe, of this planet. Because before we can address things like pollution and climate change and the very real threats endangering entire species, endangering us all, before we can play any meaningful part in bringing healing to our planet, we need to first stop all of our doing and let the planet heal us. We need to find healing for the earth within before we can bring healing to the earth around all of us. For you cannot worship Christ on the altar if you do not pity the suffering Christ in melting glaciers, in endangered animals, in parched lands, in polluted oceans, and in forests that have been reduced to ash. For those who are wise and discerning, there is no difference between the healing that can be found in the waters of baptism and in the waters of a Wisconsin lake. Now notice I said Wisconsin lake, not Illinois lake. For those of you who live on the other side of the state line, you're going to have to make your way up to Wisconsin if you want to have your cathartic experience. Even Lake Michigan is holier once you cross over the state line into the great promised land of Wisconsin, into the land flowing with beer and cheese. For those of you who are wise and discerning, there is no difference between the salvation that can be found in the Eucharist and the salvation that can be found on a mountain peak. For those of you who are wise and discerning, you understand that our entire planet is contained in the bread that you receive at the altar rail. You understand that our entire planet is an altar rail. To experience God in the Eucharist and to experience God in nature, they are two sides to the same coin. So go, find your mountain, fall in love with its beauty, let it heal you, let it overwhelm you with joy. Kneel before it with the same reverence that you would kneel at this altar rail in here. Then get up. Turn your meditation into action and fight to preserve it as the sacrament that it is before it's too late.